Greetings everyone! Welcome to another Sonic Retro Review. We're looking at Sonic Super Special 15, the final issue of this Sonic sub-series. What are these comics about, you might ask? Well, they were a quarterly 48-page series released between 1997 and 2000. The series told stories that sometimes move the overall events of the comics, tackle character arcs, expand backstory, and occasionally reprint past issues. Now, I don't know why the series eventually ended. It could be due to poor sales, I'm not sure. Anyway, I heard number 15 has a bad reputation. It's been a while since I read the issue proper, so I'll find out. Before I read the cover story, I'll tackle the second story first. I have my reasons. Sonic Spin City. Really? The story starts with Sonic in the rain confronting a pair of SWAT bots. By the way, we have noir narration throughout this tale. Sonic figure eights them to death and discovers a matchbook with the name Rusty's on it. Sonic apparently knows the place and senses a setup, but heads there anyway. What is Rusty's? A robot bar where badniks hang out. Okay, I would say that's Grounder right there, but it could also be a Burrowbot. It's up to you. Sonic sits down and orders a chili dog floats? What? Okay, drinking chili dogs. I suppose it's possible, but it's kind of gross. Plus, I don't think they would have it due to this being a robot bar. As the robots move in, presumably to attack Sonic, the lights go out, indicating a show starting. And it's a burlesque show featuring a female-shaped SWAT bot. However, longtime fans would recognize who the robot was based on one appendage. The badniks go gaga over the performance. And why would Dr. Robotnik program a libido into his robots? Moving on. A Combot grabs the Femme SWAT bot's boot, and Bunny goes down. Sonic does his routine to save her, but the Combot self-destructs, destroying the place. Sonic and Bunny fly off with the dialogue box stating that they were the ones doing the setup. And thus ends the final story of the Super Sonic Special Series. This story is a Sonic parody of the Frank Miller series, Sin City. To be honest, I'm not familiar with the series, but from what I could look up, this is kind of how Frank Miller writes his stories. This story, however, was written by Mike Gallagher, aka the Goofy comic writer. He also does the penciling, and I admit it's actually decent. I'm not a fan of the overall presentation. I'm sure there are fans that like this story with the Frank Miller-esque style and all, but I have to ask, what's the point? Why does this story exist? Before I continue, I should point out that based on my research, Sonic is supposedly in the role of Marv, yes, this guy, Bunny is in the role of Nancy Callahan, and Rusty's is a stand-in for Katie's bar. Anyway, I don't understand the overall context. If this was another plan by Robotnik to capture or kill Sonic, it's pretty lame. Then again, Robotnik did try to capture Sally and Bunny using a shopping mall. Yes, it's real, and the story was also written by Mike Gallagher. But this was during the comics' Goofy era. I'm afraid those days are long gone. If you enjoy Sonic Spin City for its uniqueness, good for you. However, for me, this gets a 5. It just doesn't click. Seriously, robots with a libido? What does this say about Dr. Robotnik?
Oh, it just makes me tingle all over.
Best not to think about it. But, my friends, I can't delay the inevitable any longer. Before we begin, I should fill you in on some backstory. The troll-faced wizard Ixis Naugus escaped from the Zone of Silence and tried to take over Mobotropolis. Sonic defeated him by using a magic sword, but the wizard ran away, prompting Sonic and Tails to chase him all over the world. Things came to a head at the Southern Tundra when Sonic and Tails finally caught up to Naugus. The two also make the acquaintance of a cybernetic Yeti named Eddie and an elderly scientist named Nate Morgan, who developed a process to create power rings. Long story. Needless to say, Nate Morgan's Power Ring stash played a pivotal role in the final battle against Naugus. Sonic, Tails, and Naugus used the rings to transform into new super forms to battle each other, most notably Ultra Sonic. And in the end, Naugus was finally banished back into the Zone of Silence. It was a bittersweet ending as Eddie sacrificed his life saving Sonic, Tails, and Nate Morgan from a collapsing home. So that's our setup, and we join Sonic some time later as he returns to the Southern Tundra. He remembers what I just recapped and wait, super states? Don't you mean ultra forms? Whatever. But we learn why Sonic's returned. He's paying respects to Eddie, and I genuinely like this. Before Sonic can leave, the ground collapses underneath his feet and he falls a long way down. The fastest thing alive, ladies and gentlemen. The hole is too high for Sonic to climb out. Remember that, folks. And now we get a few pages of nothing but darkness, Sonic's eyes, and his thought bubbles. Eventually, Sonic comes across an opening and enters a cave containing some power rings. Sonic realized that they belonged to Nate Morgan and that they weren't used during the fight. And, okay, I have to stop here. I'm sorry, but this is not Supersonic. This is Supersonic. Granted, the rings are used as part of the transformation, or at least to maintain the change, but I'm talking games and some early issues. However, we can all agree that the key component of Supersonic is Chaos Energy, usually from 7 emeralds. Okay, so Sonic found some rings that he could use to wish himself out of this mess. Yeah, I'll save it for the comments or else I'll never finish this story. Sonic remembers the fight with Naugus some more, and suddenly it causes the Hedgehog to think more about the Troll-Faced Wizard until a flash occurs. Turns out it was Sonic wishing Naugus back to this world. Okay? It's explained that Naugus still had a mental connection to Nate Morgan's rings and influenced Sonic into wishing him back. Sonic's ready to stop him, and we get some very poorly drawn action. Okay, this confused me for a moment, but after some repeated reading, it appears Naugus blasted a hole to the surface, and Sonic gets out. Remember this scene, how it was too far for Sonic to escape? You could say it was a lower area, but I can't tell. Great, I'm commenting during the story again. Sonic dodges the attacks, and Naugus boasts that he can control all the elements. To prove his point, Trollface whipped out a blizzard which covers not only this page, but the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Jeez! The idea here is Sonic can't see, and Naugus takes advantage of the situation. It's only when the wizard brings up the Power Ring wish that Sonic conveniently pulls out a ring from his coat and wishes Naugus back into the zone of silence. On his way back, Naugus says the stereotypical villain spiel about revenge and that he will return. Sonic discards the ring and states that he is not going back down there for more. Why not? Remember, they can grant wishes, and they could be useful, you know. Doesn't matter. Sonic leaves with the knowledge that Eddie's resting place is safe, thus ending the story. Oh my goodness, where to begin? Well, this story was written by Ken Penders for starters, and I feel like the story wasn't needed. It accomplished nothing, and again, what was the point? Now, my feelings towards Naugus as a villain, I don't like him personally, but this story here did not treat him with much respect. A major pet peeve I have here is using power rings as wishing MacGuffins. It's stupid. I'll buy that rings can be used as power sources for machines and certain individuals, but wishing? If that's the case, why not wish to send Eggman to another dimension, or to turn roboticized Mobians back into flesh and blood beings? It's a lazy deus ex machina that hurts this story. And guess what? This is not the only issue to feature Power Ring wishing. In fact, during my retro review marathon this summer, I'll talk about the issue in which Sonic, for lack of a better term, wishes someone back from the dead using a power ring. Oh, I'm glad this concept was dropped from the comics, but I suppose you want me to talk about the art. This story has some of the worst art to appear in any Archie Sonic comic. The culprit here is someone called Many Hands. While the breakdowns were done by Mr. Penders, this Many Hands, whoever he, she, or it was, finished the work. I'm amazed this got past the editors. It shows back then that the powers that be didn't give a crap about the comics. I mean, look at this here. Was this drawn by a staff member 6-year-old? No, I take it back. A drawing by a 6-year-old would be better than this. And you know what the sad thing is? This first page right here. It actually looks decent. I'm guessing Many Hands is probably a literal term. Many hands worked on this story. And another major fail in the art department involves several pages of either darkness or a snowstorm. You get to see a character's thought or speech bubbles, and that's it. This is laziness to the extreme, people. I can't win with this art. It's either terrible proportions or nothing. Literally. I've talked about this story long enough. Time to give this a final score. But before I do, I want to introduce a new element to my scoring system. As I dive into more retro reviews, occasionally I'll come across stories that involve death. Now, if the death, and by extension the memorial or person mourning about the death, is treated in a dignified manner, no matter who wrote it, it gets an automatic 1-point bonus. With that said, this story gets a 1 out of 10. You heard me right, folks. It would have been a 0 if not for saying paying tribute to Eddie. And with that, the Supersonic Special Series peters to a halt. I'm sorry that I had to show you this to you people. At the very least, I got one of the worst issues out of the way. Still, I feel like I should make this up to you. From what I've heard, the powers that be running Archie circa 2010 were so embarrassed by Naga's games that they decided to pull the retcon card. The story, titled Rematch, was released in 2011, and as an extra added bonus, it was a free comic book day issue. While it has some similarities to the original, there are enough differences to make this a new story. One difference is that there's a frame story set between issues 224 and 225. What you need to know for the frame story is Nagas has returned and tried to seize control of the government. Again, Sonic tries to stop him using a magic sword. Again, at the same time, Eggman launched his new Death Egg and made his way to the city, interrupting the Sonic Nagas fight. Sonic is shocked at the Death Egg's arrival, and he begins remembering some of his recent activities. Among those is Nagas' return, and how the troll-faced wizard gave the hedgehog a headache. I'm with you there, Sonic. This makes him think back to the last time he saw Mr. Trollface here, which brings us to a flashback. We enter some familiar territory as, like the original story, Sonic travels to the ruins of Nate Morgan's home in the southern tundra to pay his respects to Eddie the Yeti. Once again, after placing the rose on the ground, Sonic immediately falls through a hole. Here's where things start to differ. First, Sonic here can easily get out. No problem at all. Second, the hole containing the Power Ring Cave is right there. And third, there are no black panels with thought bubbles. Sonic peeks through the hole and not only sees a pile of rings, but good old Nagas beside them. Sonic leaps into action only for his coat to get caught on some rocks. This alerts Nagas to Sonic's presence, and Trollface immediately freezes Sonic's feet. Sonic wonders how Nagas escaped the Zone of Silence, and we get a more plausible explanation. Nagas still had some Power Ring energy from their fight in issue 63, and he used it to tear a hole back into Mobius. The Troll Wizard then plans to use the Power Ring stash to not only take over Mobotropolis, but fuse Mobius with the Zone of Silence. Sonic will have none of that, and he attacks Nagas. The wizard retaliates with an Ice Blast, which follows Sonic around the cave. In a clever bit of maneuvering, Sonic got the Ice Blast to strike Nagas. But since this is a master of elements, he breaks out with fire. Now Nagas is done playing games. With Sonic clearly outmatched, he hopes to grab some rings for a power boost, but realizes Nagas would do the same. Sonic manages to hit Nagas and taunt him again, and Nagas retaliates by burying him in rocks, along with all the power rings. Good one, Trollface. Sonic uses all the rings to transform once again into Ultra Sonic. Sonic admits that this form lacks finesse, but it's enough to send Nagas back into the Zone of Silence, with the wizard claiming that he will return, yada yada yada. The experience drains Sonic's ring power, but he finds comfort in the fact that Eddie's resting place is safe. We cut back to the present, with Sonic admitting to Nagas that he was right. He did return, but so has Dr. Eggman. Oh my goodness, this was a much better experience than that thing from Supersonic Special 15. A major, if not the major factor of this is having a competent team behind this story. First, there's Ian Flynn's writing. It may seem like I'm sucking up to the guy, and you be right, but when you compare Nagas games to Rematch, there's no contest which is the superior story. Major strengths in Ian Flynn's writing are the use of continuity, callbacks, and actual characterization. Sure, other writers have their moments, but he uses it more effectively. Though I will point this out. Sonic mentioned the last time he saw Nagas, and we flash back to the story. If you want to be technical, the last time Sonic saw Nagas was in issue 186. You know, back when Nagas was acting like a drooling animal and escaping with Mogul and the other prisoners? Yeah. Anyway, with the flashback story itself, Nagas escaped and eventual defeat once again relied on power rings. Only this time, the rings were used as a power-up item and not as a wishing MacGuffin. Jeez Louise, I'm still not over that, folks. See here, I can buy Nagas having enough power ring energy to tear a hole back into Mobius. And I can also buy Sonic turning into Ultra Sonic. Again, nice use of continuity, and ripping a hole to send Nagas back into the Zone of Silence. Much better than wishing! As an extra added bonus, Sonic used up all the rings. If you recall from Nagas games, there were still a bunch of rings in the cave, but Sonic refused to go back down there to get them. Ugh. Rematch features art by the one and only Steve Musculature Butler. I'll say this though, I prefer his artwork to that of Many Hands. It's professional for one, and two, you can actually see the action. None of this black panel or snowy panel nonsense in the gah! Well, what can I say about this story? Well, there is the final score. Once again, I take into account the Death Memorial aspect, which is a 1-point bonus, and with that, the rematch gets an 8 out of 10. There are still some flaws, but not at the level of the original story. If you want to read the rematch, you can find it here in this graphic novel. Nagas Games, the original story, will hopefully never get republished, and you can find Sonic Spin City in this book. This has been an exhausting video, folks, so I'll bow out here. And as always, have a good day, and be safe.